Hi everyone, it's Philip here, and just recording this at home in my kitchen, and having made myself a cup of coffee and reflecting on the last few scenes that kind of wrap up the fourth vision cycle of Revelation, and kind of how much they connect to my own life. And I was reflecting on these things. So there's kind of two harvests. I'll just quickly brief you on what's in the scene if you haven't read it yourself. The last kind of two scenes, as I said in chapter 14. It's two harvests. The first harvest is Jesus harvesting his faithful, his church, and that's the grain harvest. And he gathers them up, and then that's done. And then there's another harvest. It's a grape harvest. The vineyards of the earth are gathered up now, and it's a considerably more negative picture. And those grapes are crushed, and out flows this huge amount of blood, enormous amount, really. And thinking about this, that a statement that a friend once made, that you don't judge someone's character based on what they're like and when times are good. Kind of makes a lot of sense, right? When things are easy, you wouldn't expect to see what someone's really like underneath the surface, because there's no pressure. We're not under any pressure. Pressure reveals what's beneath the surface. And for me, I feel like I'm under a reasonable amount of pressure myself at the moment. There's issues in our home life, sort of mental health issues that make life difficult. And I also want to do, if I can, a good job as a pastor and as a father and as a husband and as a friend. And just right today, there's so much going on right now, and I wanted to get this video done today. I wanted to satisfy a few other responsibilities I need to get done, and it's one of those days you have, when you just don't seem to have enough time for the things that you want to get achieved. And it's not, this is the one thing I wanted to do, but it's not for me. It's for others, I hope. But I do feel a sense of responsibility, having begun these, to continue them and finish them off. And yes, I do enjoy them, but it's pressure. It's pressure to think about something worth saying, and then trying to deliver it properly. And this is the third time I've begun this video. Actually, no, I've done more than that. I bought it a few early on. And I've decided to take this approach and be a little more real about where I'm actually at, in connection to then with the stories that I'm trying to reflect on, the text that I'm in. Because as I reflected on what I needed to do this morning, reflected this morning on what I needed to do today, I thought, this is what this text is about. It's about that moment, that judgment day moment, which the harvest is really evoking that idea of judgment. Now's the time to really see what's beneath the surface. I hope that what comes out of me under pressure is good, I guess. And I know that hasn't always been the case. And I know there are times when I let my own standards down, and I feel like I let the Father down, and I leave. I keep wanting to say leave. Let Jesus down, because I want to show through my own character that I do trust Him, even though things are really hard at times, and really dark moments in the middle of the night, as I'm sure you're familiar with too. All of that being real and true, and I don't want to hide from that. In fact, I don't want to hide from it and gloss it, because I want to say, look, this is hard, but I do trust, and I do still have hope, true, genuine hope. I don't want to act as if the things that I'm facing are meaningless because of this great hope that we have, that we are genuinely struggling under a lot of trial. Nevertheless, that doesn't also undermine the hope that I have. So it kind of is, it's those two things working together, trying to see life as it really is and the difficulties that we face, and the vision cycle of this fourth vision cycle that we're in is really trying to reveal to us all that the great forces were against us, and pretty potent ones, the dragon and the beasts. These are dark forces, and were it not for God, we would be overwhelmed. So there are things in our lives that are evidence of these dark forces, and they also then become the context under which we can show the evidence of God, that we're not overwhelmed. And that, I guess, is really what I hope to become more like, to trust God enough, and a little more each time, that others might say, or there must be a God, because there's a faithful witness to him, to his character, despite the best efforts of the enemy, who I would call the enemy, despite the forces of darkness and of evil. Here is someone who nevertheless trusts that there is a good God that will bring them out of this situation, not because of their own strength and own brilliance, but because there is a good God who can do it. That's what I hope. That's what I hope these situations will train me in, today's particular stresses. I hope that I will be trained in trusting God and in learning to just let the day be the day and not worry about it overly anxiously, but try and live up to my responsibilities as best I can, with as much good grace as I can, according to the Spirit and the power of God in me. That's my prayer, and I hope that in learning to trust and love God, I become a more trustworthy and loving person myself. And no matter what kind of pressure I come under, I hope that that's what gets squeezed out of me, because this idea of harvest evokes that idea of time, that give us enough time, that if we spend enough time with the Lord, if we hang in there through hard times and good times, if we persist in making decisions that help us trust God more, then that godly character, that Christ-like nature will mature in us. I mean, that's what Paul talks about a lot in his letters, that we will be growing up, all of us, into the maturity of Christ. And the reality is, it's going to be hardship, it's going to be struggles and trials that will test that most in us and refine that most in us. And of course, no one wants to go through those things. Nevertheless, they can be for our good and to our improvement, so that when the time comes, and there is a time coming, and the Lord is waiting for a time, when the harvest is mature and it's time to reap. Now, that's not an individual issue. I think that's more the influence of the church in the world that not only matures the church, but also is as much as the church can influence the world at the point that it's at. And there's no doubt that the church has influenced the world in a very positive way, in lots and lots of ways. Hospitals and SPCA, and the care for the victim and for the vulnerable, the care for the stranger and the alien in our midst. These things which really are marks of most modern societies, they are evidence of influence from the church, because we are the faith that be mindful of the alien among you and the stranger among you. Be mindful of the widows and the orphans. Be mindful of the poor. This is the ethic of the Christian. This is the ethic of Yahweh and Jesus Christ. And so we've influenced the world, and we have a lot more influence to give still, to try and reveal to the world what God is really like, rather than what the beast would like the world to think of God. Trying to make the world afraid of God and run from him, and run to the beast instead. The great deceit that the dragon and the beast are doing such a good job at it in many quarters. So it's going to be the likes of everyday ordinary people who, nevertheless, despite the pressures they're under and the stresses they're under and the darkness that seems to be allied against them, who will nevertheless trust God and learn to love God and one another, and support one another and encourage one another. This church that we talk about, which is a group of people who will help us all die to our own egos and learn to live better with one another and for each other in the name of Jesus Christ. This collection of ordinary, strange people, which will be the better witness to the world than any other sort of successful organization or efficient machine or whatever it might be. It's going to be the normal people who have no reason to hang out together other than the fact that the Lord calls them to it, and he gives them the strength to build each other up and encourage each other. That's going to be the witness to the world. And when we come under pressure, which we are under pressure, I think of my little church, which is under pressure from, oddly enough, from bigger, more successful churches. We're under pressure within our own faith network, because people, Christians are just people, and people like to go where the success is, and they like to go where they don't need necessarily to have to give too much, where they look around and go, well, I can just relax here because it's all well taken care of, and they can just be told what to do and have a sort of a light touch on their community. Smaller churches like ours kind of demand more of the people in them. There's more pressure on you. There's more the intimacy, which is a real positive thing, can also be a negative thing for some people. They either because they don't feel like they're as connected as they think others are, or because they would rather be anonymous and don't want the scrutiny of a small village-like environment. So we're under pressure as a small church. We're under pressure as Christians. I think of the letter in Revelation. Is it? I can't remember. Is it 2 or 3? You think that you are poor and weak, but you're not actually. And I think of that as Chapel Hill. I think it's a great community, but we're not big. We're not rich. We're not strong in ways that the world would typically think of strength and power and riches. But we have a depth of character. I know that to be true, and real followers and believers of Christ who are sacrificially that way, and are willing to follow Christ wherever He leads them. So there's a real strength there, even though we think often at times, or perhaps I do in my sinful way, that we are poor and weak. I think that really the way the Lord sees us is quite different. But nevertheless, those are pressures that are on us to perhaps to be more attractive to other Christians, so that we could be not as vulnerable to changes and feel like there's a bit of a buffer between us and sort of a sudden financial crisis or a loss of a key member of the church or whatever it might be. So the temptation to compete in a faith market is just as compelling in some ways as it is to help us faithful compete and hold on to our faith in a worldly market that would like us to abandon God and follow the world in a more sort of follow the ambitions of the world and take on the values of the world. So all of these pressures are here, and they are allowed to mature. And I think again that's what the idea of the harvest is. The grain will come to its maturity, and the influence of the church in the world will come to its maturity, and there will be a time when it's time to harvest. But so too will the world's ways and worldly ways. They will come to maturity as well. And when they are harvested and pressed, what comes out of them, again, I think the image here, because we're talking about judgment and revelation and revealing what is true, it's not a slaughter scene, okay? It's not like God is harvesting the wicked and then crushing them in a wine press and out flows their blood. That's not what's coming on here. Rather, He's gathering up the world and all that it is, and He's putting the world into a press. And what comes out, well, the world may look good, it may look civil, it may look like the right way to go, the better way to go. The world may be more attractive, but you put it under pressure, and what comes out? Rivers of blood. Our society, it seems really civil, but actually it's built on the loss of innocence. It's built by egotistical fraudsters. It's built by war. It's built by the manipulation of normal people. I was reflecting on the global financial crisis recently, 2008, and I'm sure I must have shared this recently. Yeah, The Big Short, right? The Big Short was such a revelation on the systemic injustice that is built into our economic system that takes advantage of the poor, and the poor are suffering increasingly as the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. This so-called civilization is actually built on vast injustices, and many lives are just being ground down and ground into that machine so that a few people can be extraordinarily rich. There is nothing good about that, no matter how we might like to gloss it. Our civilization is desperately sick, and it's going to take the Lord to reveal that. There's going to be a maturing of that as well, to the point that no one can deny the fact that the way we're doing things, no matter how we might like to twist it and spin it, it's going to come to a point when we finally and all realize just how wrong it is. And I think that's what the maturing of that harvest is about. Just as our character is built over time and matures from an immaturity to maturity of character, so too is evil brought to a maturity of character as well, so that no one can deny the truth of what God is saying about us. So that process is also underway, and so that of course will just increase the pressure on the faithful, because the temptation to join that beast, to join in on the on the throng who are running in one direction at a great speed and seem to be doing okay. We need to resist that and hold on to faith and hold on to love and hold on to humble things. Again, final reflection. The difference between grapes and grain, I think, is probably that difference between, grain really just supplies the humble nourishment of daily bread. It's something that you need daily, and easily overlook and underappreciate the value of having a good sustaining meal. Whereas grapes and wine represent, I suppose, the luxuries of life, the things that we would really, really want to have. But when we compare them to bread, we really need bread, and wine is a luxury. And I think that there's a temptation, of course, as I say, for Christians just facing the world, that we need to stick with what is nourishing, stick to the Lord and His Word and to one another, and continue to break bread together, and resist the temptation to luxury and to glamour and to things that seem good on the appearance and on the surface, but actually lead to very bad things. But also within our own way of being faithful and within our own faith network, that we need to be mindful that we don't create churches that are just trying to attract people in. That we need to be mindful of the value of humble, earthy, grainy character. That a small church of characterful people is far more valuable than a massive church filled with weak characters who are there because they don't have to do anything. Building true character under pressure and helping each other do that, and resisting temptations to flashy excesses. So those are my thoughts. I hope that helped. Certainly it's got some things off my own chest. God bless you. See you soon.